the first dancers, as was described, to get up and show us the moves, if you will, to focus on what we want, which is a future-ready economy, treating brain health and mental well-being and cognitive resilience, not as peripheral, as has been said, but as really a core economic infrastructure and booster to our economy. And this framing session we're about to see is going to help us reposition that brain capital as the new lever for competitiveness, workforce readiness, long-term economic growth, especially as we look at industries now at pivot points, as well as we see government flows and energy also at a pivot point. The blueprint for moving forward on the state level will be discussed today, and Texas will lead that blueprint that you could potentially take from state to state, region to region, and then nationally. We're going to bring up two thought leaders in this space to speak to each other and to us about these very dynamics of that nexus that has been described. An expert in brain health and brain capital and an expert in energy systems, both of them. And I know, like me, you will be inspired by this mind-expanding conversation of these two important economies coming together. Somebody that I got to meet at WEF and who is exactly as has been described and seen on screen here, Dr. Harris Ayer, lead for neuropolicy, as well as Harry Z. Yen, and he is the lead for neuropolicy at Harry Z. Yen and Wyman Gao Senior Fellow at Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy, as well as the Senior Advisor for McKinsey and Company, and has been more than just thinking about this. He's been writing and speaking and moving and is never in the same place to try to get people together, is our lead hill dancer right here, Dr. Harris Ayer. Harris, good to see you.
Thank you, Richard.
I'm sorry I had to abbreviate your bio there, but it was only efficacious. He'll be joined by Dr. Lawrence Jones, Senior Vice President, International Programs at Edison Electrical Institute and member of the Royal Swedish Academy of Engineering Sciences. Please, ladies and gentlemen, a warm round of applause for both of them. Off to you.
The clicker. Yeah. Hey, Lawrence.
Good morning.
Thanks for being here. Good morning.
Good. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have an energy guy and a neuroscience guy on the stage, so let's see where this goes. There'll be no dancing, though, right? No dancing.
Depends.
Okay. All right.
Depends on the audience. If you want us to dance, you're going to have to motivate us to dance. So we might dance. So. But great to be here. This should be here. So, but by the way, before we start, let's see a show of hands. How many people in this audience are from the energy industry? Show of hands if you're from the energy industry. 1, 2, 3, 4. Interesting.
Interesting. And who here is from any sector that is not health? So awesome. It's very unusual to have so many non-health people and health people together in proportions like that. Yeah.
I think before we start, let me just explain how I got here, because I think it's interesting for the energy guy to be sitting on the stage at a brain health conference.
The genesis story.
So 2 years ago, I was preparing for something at EEI called the Global Electrification Forum. And I'm going through my LinkedIn page, I'm a scientist myself, and I see this article on brain capital. And there's a connection between the brain and the energy grid. One of the speakers talked about architecture. So in the energy system, we talk a lot about the energy architecture, right? And so I see this thing written by this guy, I see the title, I see he's also from Australia, I spent a lot of time there. So those things attracted me to him, right? Australia. And so we get on a call, and we're talking, and Harris is telling me all the things you should not do to have a negative brain capital. And as we're having this conversation, my daughter is in the back room, unbeknownst to me, listening to the conversation. And so he's saying, don't bring your cell phone in your room when you go to bed, get enough sleep, work out, don't just work. When you travel around the world, make sure you get enough sleep. All the things I should not do. And so we get off the phone, and my daughter walks into the room and says, Daddy, you have a negative brain capital. Really, Harris? But that was, for me, the moment that I realized that this thing is serious, because that conversation really changed my life, because she is now the one reminding me that I got to run, which I did this morning, by the way. I had to get enough sleep. I had to eat right. So that conversation was the genesis to what ended me up coming here. And I've been to many brain events with Harris. I'm happy today I'm not the only energy guy, so we're making progress. So we have 4 people here from the energy sector as opposed to just me.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. It's credit to Lawrence's open-mindedness that he's an energy guy that's thinking about the brains of the workforces of people in the energy sector, for example. And you can see this article that I put around on the seats, an article that Lawrence just published yesterday, which is for the energy sector. So distilling the brain capital work for the energy sector is a wonderful service, Lawrence. And I love the Global Electrification Forum and have now been back twice. Let me say, as we share personal stories, for me this is a very meaningful day, because for me my career really transformation started in Houston. Bill McKeon just walked in, who's the CEO of the Texas Medical Center. Bill's responsible for better or for worse for me being in Houston. And so Bill, thank you for being here, because a lot of what we're doing here is thanks to your support back maybe about 10 years ago, and now on support from Maureen Hackett, who's going to be here soon, the Meadows, Harry Yan, Leah Gross. Anyway, so this is really special to have friends from Houston, from America, and then from also all around the world. I think Raj, who's here from New Delhi, has probably the biggest amount of miles traveled and the hardest trip. So we're very grateful to you, Dr. Damija, for being here representing the nation state of India and the great work there. So thank you all. Let's just do some level setting. I want to take you through a couple of slides. I think the opening talks and videos have explained this pretty well. So I want to break it down a little bit and then get more specific. So this brain economy transition is about moving from one place to another place. Just like, you know, the energy transition is going from fossil fuel-based energy sources to a mix of clean and renewable and then traditional energy sources, one place to the next, involving all sorts of different stakeholders. That's what we're doing with this brain transition. We want to go from a brain negative position to a brain positive position. We want to look at, and so how do we do that? Measurement is very important. So we have a global brain capital dashboard that looks at brain capital and measures it country by country. It looks at the determinants of brain capital, social, environmental, digital determinants. It looks at brain health, the presence or absence of diseases across the lifespan, autism, depression, Alzheimer's, and it looks at our brain skills, cognitive and non-cognitive skills. And the Global Brain Capital Dashboard is available online if anyone's interested to check it out. And we think that it needs to be localized to different regions now. So we want to embark upon a Greater Houston Brain Capital Dashboard. Also, when we think about, let's just say there's 5 pillars of how you do the brain economy transition. There's personalized approaches. We need much better personalized ways of treating people with disorders and frankly also educating kids in schools. So that gets to this whole field of neurotechnology that you'll hear about today, which Houston is really the leading city in the world in neurotechnology. We need to think about population level strategies. What are we doing for the entire workforce of companies? For example, big multinational companies, that's really important. We're going to have a bunch of different experts speaking about that. Then, of course, measurement, I mentioned. There's some folks will be launching a new measurement strategy for companies, which is very impressive. Takes our global brain capital dashboard and makes it actionable to actual companies. Investing is very important. We're not going to achieve this brain economy transition unless we have dollars and cents going into the field. And so, interestingly, there'll be the first venture capital fund in the world that's focused on brain capital, brain economy is being launched here, and we'll have all of the portfolio companies are here. So this is a landmark that the venture industry is looking at this. We also work with the European Investment Bank, which is the biggest public bank in the world. It's based in Luxembourg. It's the Bank of the European Union. And the European Investment Bank has a strategy that they're developing with us on the brain economy. How do they do the brain economy? How do they fund it in Europe? So I need to figure out with all of you, how do we bring the great work of the European Investment Bank? They actually pioneered green bonds, which is now a $1.3 trillion financial market, and they're working with us on brain bonds. So imagine if that could be a $1.3 trillion financial market. That could really revolutionize the whole field of what we're talking about. But how do we bring the Luxembourgians, the European Investment Bank, back to Houston, make it relevant? Do we need to create some dialogues with the Federal Reserve Bank or other commercial banks or other public banks in America? That's a question. The fifth pillar is coordination. That's what we're figuring out here today. We need to think about what are we doing globally to coordinate ourselves, and we just launched yesterday with the World Economic Forum, the Brain Economy Action Forum. That is a coordination strategy. There was a big meeting yesterday in Geneva at the World Health Assembly on the brain economy. So some brave souls are actually flying right now from Geneva to Houston. They'll be here this afternoon so they can share with us about how the global strategy maps to this local Houston strategy. And we've been working with the Center for Houston's Future on the local strategy with McKinsey, with the Greater Houston Partnership and local stakeholders. And it's important that this brain economy doesn't stay as this sort of idea. We need action and impact. And so that, I think the next 2 days really signify moving from ideas into action and impact, and developing a local strategy with Houston as the first city in the world doing a local strategy. How do we put the wheels on the road with the brain economy to potentially grow the Houston economy by, say, like 5% GDP growth in the next 10 years? That's the question that we want to involve all of you in and help us to ideate in the next couple of days. So I want to put a bit more meat on the bone about that's what this is. That's sort of some of the strategies and projects that we have and people in the ecosystem. It's very tangible. There's a place for everyone, whether you're an academic medical center or a school teacher or a neurosurgeon, and we can talk about that and answer any questions. So anyway, let's also just say that Houston is special because we've been through leadership and strategy for the energy transition, the Houston Energy Transition Initiative, or HETI, so this is why Lawrence and I are here to talk about this sort of comparative collaborative learning. HETI is a thing that exists. It makes Houston the center of the energy transition globally, and it is a model that we can look at. So as you study this slide, you can see, okay, this is what Houston did for hydrogen, for example. You can see that we're studying this and thinking about how do we make a Houston Brain Economy Transition Initiative, or HBETI, or whatever it would be. So maybe we think of a better name in the next couple of days. But anyway, you get the point. That's what this is about. So, Lawrence,
let's talk about some of the connections between the brain capital issue and energy. So what most people don't know is that when you hear words like brain architecture, you start thinking about the energy system. You start thinking about how the brain works. There are a lot of analogies between the two. You really see why we should pay attention to both systems, if you may. But one of the things I wanted to maybe start with is this word, is energy abundance. We hear a lot about energy abundance today. It's very important across the globe. I run the international program at EEI. As you know, I travel a lot around the world.
And explain EEI for everyone.
So EEI stands for the Edison Electric Institute. We represent all investor-owned utilities in the U.S., and we also have about 70 international companies in 90 countries, and I run the international program. And what I see around the world is that obviously everyone is talking about energy, but to have energy abundance, you have to have brain capital surplus. And the reason why I say that, Harris, is if you think about the energy transition, the energy evolution, one of the things we need for that is creativity and imagination. Mm-hmm. Well, those two things get stymied if you don't have positive brain capital. Mm-hmm. And I think in terms of sort of one thing I see here in the context of the two systems is that there are a lot of lessons that I think the brain capital industry, if we should call it that now, can learn from the energy system or the energy industry when it comes to transitions. Mm-hmm. And I just want to bring up two that I think is important. The first one has to do with telling the right story about what the transition is about, so that the consumers. In the case of the energy system, it was the users of electricity. In the case of the brain, the capital industry, it will be all of us in this room. That personalize the story to understand why it's important. It is not just, the economic aspects is important. I see George here and others who want to see that as an economic driver. But there's also sort of a life expectancy, a lifespan issue here where if you have positive brain health, there are a lot of things that benefit your life. So I think if we can personalize the story, the mistake we made in the energy industry, it was almost like a top-down. Whereas if you do this from a bottom up in the brain capital sector, I think there's one room for success.
And you did mention that there can be backlash against these top-down strategies if we don't have actual speaking to hearts and minds and grassroots activity, in which we want to completely avoid any backlash as much as we can.
You got to do that. And look, let me just bring one example. So George, you and George were at the Global Electrification Forum last 2 weeks ago. And it was interesting because you had two energy, one brain guy, maybe a semi-brain guy, talking to a group of energy executives. When that session was done, it was over, you guys got more questions than you probably thought you anticipated. It's because once you personalize the story about the brain, people get it. People understand why it's important. And so you're beginning to see executives around the world, even in the energy industry, beginning to say, look, what does this mean for my company? What does it mean that, I have a gym in the building, but having a gym doesn't mean I have a positive brain capital, right? Having a well-being program in my company doesn't mean I have a positive brain capital. So I think if you can personalize the story around brain capital, which is something I think you and George did an excellent job. Just don't talk about p-tau early, but keep the p-tau conversation out of the room, because that confused people, which is another thing, right? Simplify the message, but don't trivialize the problem. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lawrence. I do think that's an example. I think of in Europe, right? We go to Europe regularly with the brain economy, and seeing the backlash against the green transition in Europe has been quite startling. And so how do we, as we think about our transition here collectively in this room, how do we avoid that backlash? And it does start with storytelling and grassroots empowerment.
And I think one other mistake we made in the energy industry was that because it was in some cases top down, there were too many promises made on behalf of the industry in terms of what we can and cannot do and how quickly we can get it done. So the transition timeline needs to be pragmatic and realistic. And even in the context of the brain capital transition, you want people to understand that you're not going to take a magic pill tomorrow and become a brain positive. You have to do the work. It will take time, right? It's not going to be a quick fix. And I think if you guys can help us understand that fixing your brain negative problem is not a quick fix, you will succeed. Because if people think it's a quick fix, you have a backlash. I've been going to the gym for the last month and I haven't lost weight and I can't sleep. My brain is hurting me. You know, George, you said I would be healthy if I did this. It's not happening because transitions take time. Right? And that's something I think we need to keep in mind.
Great point. Setting appropriate expectations. This other point here that brains are networks like energy grids, you know very well as the energy grid expert. One of the things we're very passionate about is executive education in breaking this down and distilling it for folks in different sectors. And so one of our friends from the energy sector was in our recent executive education course that was 4 days, and Lawrence and I are talking about executive education on the brain economy for the energy industry. And so we may tap some of you to be faculty, to be involved in that. It's very important that we provide this sort of education to the energy field, which you do very well, and you've set up for us with the Jeff.
So one of the reasons I wrote the article you have on your page, on your seats there, working with my team, was that, you know, we talk a lot about the brain, and the reason why the energy grid and the brain grid, if you made the green architecture, have a lot of similarities is because the brain needs a lot of energy. So one of the questions I asked Harris, I'm going to put him in the spot, he may not remember, was how much energy does the brain need to function every day? Can you just try to think about how much energy your brain needs every day? And one thing I learned from Harris is that your brain never stops. Even when you sleep, it's using energy. Whereas you can think, well, the grid, the same thing with the grid. The generators are always running because you want electricity 24/7. So for me, when I think of the energy system and the brain, there's a lot of similarity because the brain is always consuming energy, well, guess what? The economy is always consuming energy. So even when you're asleep and you have your iPhone still running or you have your health monitor running, it's consuming energy. So that means both energy and brain are constantly consuming energy in that sense, right? And so we need to think about the fact that how do you do this continuously, right?
Yes. Well, and the human brain takes about the same amount of energy as a small light bulb to power itself. So the brain is the most energy efficient thing or substance in the known universe. So as you think about these advanced artificial intelligence systems, generative AI, and the data centers that are consuming all this power, that people are saying there's not enough energy in the system, maybe we need nuclear power, modular and nuclear power stations to power the AI, learning from the brain it's called neuromorphic computing, to infuse that brain-efficient learning and energy approach into the energy system is very important, and one of the things that Lawrence and I talk about regularly. So,
one thing I like about this idea of the brain and the sort of the energy system is we all know that in the energy system we have one of the things we're trying to solve is energy storage. We don't have the storage capacity, right? But on the other hand, the brain does have a storage in a sense because you have passive memory and you have your active memory or long-term, short-term memory, right? Yes. And so when you think about, when I'm using my long-term memory, am I still consuming energy? Well, I did my own little research, and you can correct me, doctor. You're still consuming energy even in your long-term memory, right? So could the grid also, we talk in the grid about long-duration storage, where you're storing energy for using it when there is no wind blowing in Texas or there's no sun shining in Texas. Well, long duration storage for me is the same thing as having my long duration memory of stuff in the past. Well, if you don't have positive brain capital, your long duration and your short duration memory doesn't function, right? So we're actually using the brain more now to talk about energy, and my goal being here is that you all will talk more about the brain using energy. So you help me talk the energy story, and I help you tell the brain story.
Yeah, and it reminds me also that you see companies, neurotechnology companies like Elon Musk's Neuralink, he's talking about taking memory of the memory of learning jujitsu, and can you plug that into your brain and download the jujitsu capability into your brain? So that's another interesting one. It's obviously sci-fi at the moment, but as I said before, Houston has the best neuroengineering capabilities in the world, and we will have a number of experts from Rice University and other universities that you can ask questions about the frontiers of these brain-machine interfaces. So that's going to be fun. So
I have a question for the audience, though.
Yes, let's go.
Because they're not going to ask us questions, and Richard's not going to ask us questions either, so we can ask them before we get off stage.
Yeah.
So let me just see, show of hands, how many people got up this morning feeling that they had a positive brain capital? It's interesting. Who felt they had a negative brain capital? It's okay if you put your hands up.
Who flew in? Yeah.
So you see more positive brain capital than negative. So hopefully by the end of the day, you should ask the question, Richard, and let's see if things have gone the other way where we've had more negative brain capital. But Harris, I have another question for you though.
Yes.
Talk about, from an economic perspective, how do you see the nexus of the brain industry and the energy industry sort of helping Houston? What most people don't know here is that, so when it comes to wind energy, for example, Texas, the state of Texas led the world. In fact, when you did the first wind energy model here in Texas in 2001, 2002, I was part of that project back then. And today you see how wind, Texas lead the US in terms of wind. So where do you see this nexus of energy and brain moving Texas and moving Houston more specifically?
Yeah, I think that I was struck by Bill Gates did an op-ed last year saying that he came to Texas to see the future of the energy industry. So people like Bill Gates and Breakthrough Energy see Texas as the future of the energy sector and see it as a hive of places that he should invest his money and the Breakthrough Energy should invest its money. I would love to see that Bill Gates comes here again and says he saw the future in Texas for the brain economy, and that we have industrial innovation going on. We have the biggest neurotechnology industrial innovation in the world. We have cancer neuroscience leadership in the world that's generating all these startups, and big corporates are doing deals and joint ventures and stuff. We have some people from MD Anderson Cancer Neuroscience. We have we're boosting the GDP of Houston by 5%, whether it's through better early childhood brain development, which Keonta's going to talk about, whether it's through better education, helping kids with dyslexia to learn better, to get better educational opportunities, helping mums that are having peripartum depression to get better treatment. How do we help workers be more productive, less suicidal ideation, for example, and suicide issues, which is a big problem in the construction sector. All these things, when you think about them across the lifespan and across sectors, can boost the brain performance of Houston. And we can measure it. We're going to start doing that and talk more about it with strategists perhaps tomorrow. So that's how I see this happening. It's industrial innovation. It's frankly DPRIT, the Dementia Prevention Research Institute of Texas, a $3 billion dementia prevention bill that just passed through the House and Senate of Texas that's going to a big state vote in November. It's the biggest thing in brain financing in the world right now. That's going to be huge and generate all these researchers coming in, and then all the other things I mentioned about education and workforce performance. So that's sort of the gamut of what we have in front of us, and it means we need policy, philanthropy, research, we need private sector, we need public-private. It involves all those things. So that's what I think about when I think about the next 5 to 10 years of Houston and the brain economy.
Yeah, so one other angle as you were talking that came to my mind was Houston in itself being an international city. City. So if you globalize this conversation, all of a sudden you see how the opportunities for Houston becomes even bigger.
Yes.
Because I know you've been doing some work in Africa with folks there regarding the brain capital of parts of Africa. So if you think about the technology, right?
Yes.
Neurotech, which is going to be discussed here this week.
Yes.
There's a huge opportunity of exporting technology. You and I met someone in Davos who's doing some very cool stuff, and you'll hear about it here this week, the next couple of days here. But how do you see it from a global perspective? You mentioned in your video collaboration. This is something I know George is also very concerned about. How do we galvanize international support, even at the UN? Because this is a global opportunity, not just a global problem, but a global opportunity. How do you see it happening?
Yes, good question. And I'm just cognizant of time. Do we have?
We're gonna get a warning.
I think we might be over the warning time, though. Richard, what are we? 5 minutes. Okay.
Perfect.
So the energy sector is the most global sector in the world, and Houston's this global melting pot. I think we have more languages spoken in Houston than any city in the world. So I think, to answer your question, what we need to do with the brain economy is we need to make Houston the center of excellence, the lighthouse of how this happens at a local level. And then it turns out that the G7, the economic NATO, the 7 big economies of the world in many ways, that turns out that's in Canada. And so we're doing a brain economy summit in Calgary, June 14th. And Jenny and Dilpriya and Andrew, do you want to put your hands up? We have some Canadians in the room. We want to take this Houston model, and as many of you as are willing to join us and go to Calgary and talk to G7 leaders, talk to G7 people about this work. So that's partly how we're going to start to internationalize it. And don't just go to Calgary, we can go to Banff afterwards and enjoy the Rockies and see some sights. And then, of course, the United Nations. We go every year now to the United Nations General Assembly in New York in September, so we will be having another Brain Economy Summit there. We have the Lausanne Dialogues in Lausanne, Switzerland, and so on and so forth. So basically we are slowly taking this model of Houston and taking it around the world and hoping to inspire people. This is healthy competition, friendly competition. We want Houston to lead, but we want to stimulate this happening in other parts of the world too.
Well, my brain just got relieved because Richard said we got 10 minutes.
Oh, okay. All right.
So we got 10 minutes, so we got more time,
okay.
Right? And that brings me to this issue of congestion. In the grid, we talk about congestion management. When you have an overload of electricity going through one transmission line, you have to sort of reroute it. And I was thinking about the brain when my brain gets congested. What creates that, right? So for example, when George said we had 5 minutes, my immediate reaction was, whew, right? Richard says 10 minutes, whew, relief, right?
Yes.
So let's talk about it in the context of the energy workforce, which is something I'm very passionate about, right?
Yes.
We're now seeing a lot of extreme weather events around the world. You saw some in Texas as well. How important do you see it is in terms of workforce recognizing the negative impacts of extreme weather events or the psychological impact, and how could that affect how they do their job? Any recommendations you would say for the energy industry in that regards?
Yes. Well, I am decompressing now because I was worried that I was running over time for Kelly, and my goal today, George, is to make Kelly maximally happy because she's done all the hard work to bring us together. So I am taking some deep breaths to reset. We live in a world of a polycrisis, right? We have these cascading crises, or if it's not a polycrisis, it's like polyvolatility. We even see it now with geoeconomics, geopolitics, climate, or it's the next artificial intelligence update that's either helping us or hindering us or subverting us. So these are all big issues, and when you make me think about climate and the energy sector, of course, the people that are building the big energy hydro dams and nuclear, we have Bechtel, one of the biggest construction firms in the world here today. They're doing this in the environment, and the environment is increasingly difficult. It's hot, there's drought, there's disasters, and so we do need to think about what are we doing to support the brain health of the energy workers in the energy industry. That's really important. So we have to think about things like the Business Collaborative for Brain Health scorecard to assess companies' brain health of their employees and develop, and once we get a good report, we do the same thing and we do better, or we see a bad report card and we have to fix it. So then I think about the brain health matrix that's going to be launched here soon by Steve and his team. We need more measures, more tools for companies. People need to have brain resilience. George likes to talk about brain resilience. That brain resilience is something that in the past has not been studied in neuroscience or in brain medicine, but we have the potential now with advanced neuroscience to figure out what is brain resilience and how do we build it. Do you build brain resilience with talking therapy, with diet, with perhaps some kind of way that you can stimulate your resilience centers of your brain? So all those things we need to think about, and it's not one thing, it's an array of things, and that's why in the next 2 days we do have people from private, philanthropy, public, universities, and all these different modalities coming together. So that all of these tools are super important because it's an undeniable issue that people working outside are going to increasingly struggle, and we need to invest more in better solutions.
Yeah, you said brain resilience. What's so funny is that most of the phrases, the words being used here are the same words we use in the energy industry. We talk about resilient grid and all of those kinds of things.
Thank you so much, Lawrence.
Thanks for having us.
But we do want to see what your brain capital moves are. Do you have a brain capital move?
We do, but...
All right, go ahead. You have time to think about it.
Yeah, I do.
All right. You're lucky I'm not going to be here later this afternoon. Otherwise, I'd make you show us.
Yes.
Lawrence, thank you so much. Harris, thank you so much. Quick reflections. And it was so interesting to see the two thought leaders here standing to bring two very different things together. And I think as we look past to look forward, my mentor came from Exxon here in Houston and in California. And if you look at that model from the 50s and 40s of the great defense industry that we had and how California changed its economy to focus on AI in the 1950s, this is the opportunity we have when we look at energy and oil as a wide open economy with the biggest brains now transitioning into what? And that could be in brain capital. There's a lot of lessons if we look back in history, not too long ago, about where we can go here in Texas with all of this great brain power here. And UAE, yes, definitely those where they have new systems being put in place. I was just there for 2 weeks in the last month. They're open to all sorts of new systems like we're talking about here today. And this is one of those openings here in Texas. 10-minute break. We expect you right back out here at 10:39 is what they tell me. Head over to the green room. I'll put way over there the brainstorm, brain food room on my right as well. We'll see you in 10 minutes.